Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I mentioned in my video earlier today discussing CrossFit, you know what, I think there actually is a lot of merit to everyone training for general fitness or even people with more specialized goals to learning some of the basic, classic, and Olympic lifts. And the reason I say that is because of the amount of utility that these things bring. And I've said historically, you guys remember my stance on that. I always said, they're great lists, they're useful lists, but the degree of complexity required to learn them just makes them just not worthwhile for general purposes. And you know what? I've had to come to the realization that I think I was wrong on that. I said that years ago, and I said that even knowing that most coaches out there have people at least power clean for field athletes, everyone else. And here's the question I would ask us. If we are pursuing true fitness and athleticism, the exercises that are time proven to make really good and even great athletes, I don't think we can disregard those. And here's the thing. We all like to pretend and say that stuff, myself included. We like to lie to ourselves. You know why we lie to ourselves? Because these exercises require a bit of skill to teach other people. You have to actually learn to perform these exercises well before you can teach other people. Now, learning the basics on them isn't that hard. You know what? It's not difficult with the amazing amount of tutorials we have out there today, resources we have available online, and books and everything else to learn the basic power clean and the basic power snatch. Now, to get really good at them, to have an expertise in them, you are going to need a very, very skilled coach. And it might take you a month to learn them very well, or it might take you 3 years to learn them very, very well, under the eye of an experienced coach, depending on their skill level and your capacity to learn. But you know what? It isn't necessary to master these exercises to a high degree of skill to make use of them. When your goal is not to do them competitively and hit the highest max possible and try to go to nationals, when you're using them to improve general athleticism, size, strength, speed, all of those things, it's not necessary to do that. You just need to learn the basics. And like I was saying earlier, if CrossFit can teach a bunch of housewives and grandmothers how to do the basic versions of these exercises, anybody can learn this. All right, I'm sorry, but that's a cop-out. It's a cop-out because none of us want to master these exercises well enough to teach them to other people. And so therefore people who instruct others and give advice and everything else have historically just disregarded them in the last couple of decades. I think that's a mistake. And I'm going to break down for you guys a little bit of what they can really bring to the table. And like I'm saying, I've been redoing my own training style lately and discussing lift mastery and these things, and I've broken down pretty well why I think getting really, really good at 4 basic exercises, in this case, the barbell squat, the deadlift, the strict standing press, and the bench press. That's what most of my focus is on these days. Mastering those lifts really sets a good foundation for size and strength, not just for powerlifting or Mark Ripto and starting strength lifting or anything like that, but just a good general size and strength base. I mean, obviously there can be some other pulling so you get a little more lat and bicep, like I'm doing pendlay rows right now, which I'm pretty good at, and I feel that they're a good exercise for me personally. That's a good foundation, but I've had to ask, what's missing, because we are dealing with true exercise minimalism at that point. We're dealing with a high degree of specificity, but the situation we always run into on high specificity training programs, even when we choose to keep them minimalist, which I generally recommend, I think lift mastery is more important than exercise selection. I think it's worth more in the long term for most people out there lifting. The question we get into is, what about assistance work, weak point training? What about variation to avoid overuse injuries? All right, these are still the problems we run into, and the question I would ask is how to resolve this. I don't think the bodybuilder approach is the best way to do it. I think that paradigm and the whole bodybuilding paradigm and the way they do things, particularly for people who aren't blasting a bunch of gear, kind of needs to die off. And the reason for it is muscles can be brought up with anything that makes them work. We don't need to target an isolation movement with a bunch of volume just to bring up a possible weak point. That's not necessary, and if we're going to get the most out of it, we need to be saying, okay, If we're going to really focus on true minimalism, which is mastering a minimal number of exercises, no more than 7 or 8 tops, so that we get the most bang for our buck, we really need to be saying, well, sure, this exercise brings up this body part, but what else does it do? If all it does for us is one thing, that's a wasted exercise. If an exercise only brings one thing to the table and nothing else, it's a useless exercise for our purposes of people who want to be efficient, want to be effective. An exercise needs to bring 2 or 3 different things to the table to really make it worth doing, unless someone has just such an enormous glaring weak point that it must be addressed in that way. I don't think the majority of people do. And when you look at stuff like the Olympic lifts, here's where I'm going with that. You learn things like the power clean and the power snatch. You need to understand the carryover these exercises have to your other big lifts. You understand these are exercises that work the entire body. These are exercises that will bring up weak points by their very nature. These exercises, due to their explosive nature and their full body nature, tend to follow a rate coding pattern that will find your weak chains through the whole kinetic chain of those lifts and beat on it and force it to adapt and grow. Whether it's your traps or your glutes or different parts of your core, it will find it. Same thing, power snatch. It will bring up parts of your shoulder girdle and delt. If they are lagging, it will force them to adapt. Because, some of these exercises work large numbers of muscles through the shoulder girdle and the posterior chain and the core and all these other things. They're really fantastic for bringing up multiple weak points concurrently, for fixing multiple problems. They're valuable for helping you maximize your power potential relative to your strength. All right, and if you want to be more athletic, you need to be as explosive as your potential and muscle fiber distribution will allow you to be. If you want to be more athletic, and I think all of us need to think about that, not just body composition, but our athleticism, because all of us don't want to be just single-faceted, I would hope, in our fitness. So what these exercises do, they do that, but then they bring other things to the table. When you learn to power clean a respectable amount of weight or power snatch a respectable amount of weight, that opens up other exercise variations to continue to give you accessory exercises that will help you avoid the overuse injuries, and giving you the exercise variation to help stave off injuries and can help with weak point training. And what do I mean by that? Well, the power clean itself, for example, we know is an amazing deadlift accessory. Your power clean will improve your deadlift. Strength coaches had noted that over the years. Powerlifting coaches had noted that. Well, your deadlift makes most of the muscles in your body grow. So anything that improves it and that's easier to recover from than the deadlift becomes valuable. But once you can power clean, what else can you do? You can do multiple exercises easier. There are things you can do to bring up other lifts. For example, you could rotate through phases to where you power clean and then front squat. Now, some people will be like, well, that might not be a lot. Well, if you're doing it as a squat accessory, that becomes valuable. Why? Because you might already be fatigued from squatting. You can't handle a maximum squatting session. So the weight that you could power clean up gives you a clean practice, gives you some benefits of doing extra power cleans, allows you to go into front squats, which will carry over to other lifts. Even if it's with a lighter weight than you'd normally use for 3 to 5 rep sets, triples for 5s or whatever, let you power clean into a front squat. Again, that's going to make you more athletic. That front squat's going to carry over to your deadlift. It's an amazing deadlift accessory, and it's an amazing squat accessory. So then the ability to clean and front squat together can help with your deadlift. How about snatches and overhead squat? All right, the snatch is already going to be a good exercise for your strict press. Perfect example, your strict press could be a bit of a weakness, and your squat concurrently. Learning to power snatch and then overhead squat gives you an easier to recover from exercise accessory movement that you could run through in phases where your squat might be stalled a little bit, or your overhead press might be stalled a bit. And some people say, well, your overhead press isn't going to benefit that much from it. Well, it does work your shoulder girdle and it works your delts. Your delts get hammered really hard by both snatches and even the overhead squat. It could very well carry over to getting your shoulders stronger and your quads stronger and everything else, your core stronger, to help with those lifts. So it's a lighter, easier exercise variation that has a degree of complexity, but it could help. Same thing, the ability to clean and then push press. All right, clean and then push press. Again, the ability to use these tools gives you a whole new arsenal of big, heavy barbell movements that will bring up various weak links in your kinetic chain that will improve your strength on your main lifts, which is where you're getting most of your size and strength. And do so in a manner that gives you exercise variation that helps with overuse injuries, helps with overall recovery. All these things that we talk about, the only reason you need exercise variation is really for those reasons. The ability to learn a basic power clean and a power snatch really opens up different options to you to use other big complex barbell movements to handle your exercise variation and assistance work needs, and use exercises that work the entire body so that you stimulate more additional growth, power, athleticism, all of these things. So honestly, I think they bring a lot to the table. And I really think this is an area that needs to be looked at by a lot more people a lot further when it comes to minimalist style training. They bring so much potential to the table that I think they're really worth learning and incorporating. And honestly, guys, they're not as hard to learn as they've been made out to be, at least at the non-elite level. For someone who's using them as a general fitness tool, they're not that difficult to learn. They really aren't, because you're not trying to go compete in Olympic lifting. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.